My first instrument was the voice. I started out in the choir when I was 4. Immediately after that, my sister brought home a recorder because they started playing recorder. My sister and I went to the same primary school. And when you are 6, which is first form, you start recorder. So when she came home with a recorder, I started playing recorder as well, because you know how siblings are. If you could do it, I could do it too. And so I started playing recorder pretty soon after she did. And then after recorder was the steel pan. And then after the steel pan, I got a trumpet. I got a trumpet when I was 10. And I stopped trumpet when I was 14 because I had braces. I started playing drums and percussion. And then when I was 16 and the braces came off, I picked back up the trumpet. So my musical training in Trinidad was very multifaceted in the sense that it came from all different directions. There was a lot of musical training, believe it or not, at home, in the sense that my parents were always playing records at the house, so I was always listening to music and not knowing at the time that I was learning music. And in addition to that, during the holiday season, specifically Christmas time, and Advent in Trinidad is one of the biggest musical seasons. As we have a tradition called parang, which is basically Venezuelan folk songs, old Venezuelan folk songs. And they are secular songs about the nativity of Christ. Normally they take a couple of phrases from the Bible and then they turn it into a song in Spanish. And so that tradition was a part of my family. I come from a parang family. And so, but they were scattered all over the US, and so some people would come home for Christmas. But either way, parang would happen, and so I was too small to play any of the instruments, but I would see them playing and singing, and everybody would be dancing or beating a bottle or picking up the cheese grater with a fork, and which would that would get my mother angry, because once that happened, that cheese grater was done. I had to go to the grocery next day, get a new one. And so that was the home music education. And then there was school, primary school. We had a choir. Mr. White was the music teacher, and growing up, he was one of my biggest idols. His name was Mr. Michael White, and he just retired in July of this year. And he was the pianist, and he was the music teacher and the accompanist for the choir. And Miss Jagbeer was the conductor of the choir. And between the two of them, Miss I see her face right now. She was the most animated person I knew growing up. And Mr. White was the most serious person I knew. So it was a great combo. It was like good cop, bad cop. And we would learn, it was a completely different concept to the way things go in America. There was not much sight reading involved. We learned to clap the rhythms, so we knew how to read music, from playing recorder. But every choir rehearsal, when we were learning new music, they would write the lyrics on the board, on the blackboard. And we would all take our copybooks out and copy down the lyrics to the song. And then we would go through line by line, enunciating exactly the same way, each word. And then Mr. White would play the melody and sing it with the words, and we would go through that. It was a long process, but after a week, we knew it inside out. And there were a lot of tongue twisters involved, like she sells seashells on the seashore. Motilal Munan moves mountains every Monday morning. Just different ways of getting, and we would use them as competitions between each other. And then on top of that was primary school. On top of that, there was also, my father played in a steel band called Phase 2 Pine Grove, which I eventually played in as well. And in the steel band, you learn to play all by ear. You watch whoever's next to you. You stand next to somebody playing the same instrument. You follow their hands. And if you are there when they're actually learning the tune, the arranger, he simply calls out note by note. So he'll call them maybe 3 or 4 notes at a time. It's like G, C, A, D, and then he'll clap the rhythm or knock it out on the pan, and then we all try it. And, again, a different process. But that way we would learn hours of music. And nobody ever pulled out a piece of paper. So it was a lot of ear learning. And I was also a member of, when I was from about 11 to about 14, I was a student at a school called the Brass Institute, which was probably what would be more towards the Western European tradition of music education where you're learning, you're taking theory classes, and I was in kind of a Caribbean version of a wind ensemble, and we would read music and play concerts and those types of things. So that was the beginning of my music. That was my music education. It's a lot of steel pan, parang, just watching and listening to parang, listening to recordings. Just it was all these different. The choir was very important. Just learning how to get a lyric in your head and get the melody in your head. Learning or repetition to the nth degree, and then I played in a rock and roll band. And to me, I still consider that an education because it was trying to learn how to fit a horn section into a rock band, a reggae rock band called Orange Sky, and they still play to this. They still play today in Trinidad, and that was another learning experience. So that was my education in Trinidad.
So then, stay in.
Well, my introduction to jazz, I don't know exactly when it really was because, like I said, my father was a DJ. And so he played all kinds of music in the house because my parents would go to jazz festivals. I remember when St. Lucia Jazz Festival started getting really big in the early 90s, mid 90s, and they would go every year because St. Lucia is just a 45-minute flight from Trinidad. And my father was actually living in St. Lucia for a while working. So my parents and all of their friends, they would go. They'd come back and they would leave these ticket stubs on the table. And I would see these names. So I remember I saw Chick Corea's name on a ticket. I saw Nicholas Payton's name on a ticket, Roy Hargrove's name on a ticket, Joshua Redmond's name on it. So all those names were with Frank Morgan's name on a ticket, Frank Morgan. And so I saw all these names. So the names were in my head. And then I got my cousin Richard, who lives in Colorado, Dr. Richard Charles. He came down to Trinidad to visit in, I think, 1996 or 97, after a long time away from Trinidad. And he brought 2 records. He brought a Wynton Marsalis record, Standard Time Volume 3, Volume 2, The Resolution of Romance. It's the one with Ellis on it. And then he brought on a John Coltrane record. And he wouldn't let me keep the John Coltrane record, but he let me keep the Wynton Marsalis record. So that was probably my first jazz record. And my second one, I never forget, was Monty Alexander's Yard Movement. It was given to me by a gentleman by the name of Lester Martyr, who was a lawyer in St. Lucia. And I was about 14 then, so I was listening to it, but I would try to play along, but I wasn't serious. I wasn't serious enough to know, well, maybe I should learn every single event on this album, which I eventually did. But the album that hooked me into jazz was John Coltrane's Blue Train. I was in college by that time at Florida State University. I was a freshman. And I never forget, I heard Lee Morgan's trumpet solo, and I was on first track, Blue Train, and that was it. That was the hook, and I got reeled in. And then I found out about it 2 days later that he was 19 when he played on that track, and I at the time was 19. I was just like, wow, well, that's what he's doing at age 19. Okay, I better get some work done. And so then that's when the heavy, studious, trying to absorb as much as possible, try to be a sponge, ask as many questions as possible, listen to as many recordings. That's when that started. So I was about 19 then. Hi, this is Etienne Charles. For more videos, go to jazztimes.com.